Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Wanted to make a really quick video. I think I'm going to have semi-clickbaity. I guess you can't really call it clickbait. It's a catchy. I like catchy titles, so you guys will click on this. But it's an important video, and it's a video that I want to make in order to communicate the sheer possibility of extraordinarily high teraflop outputs using current CUs, compute units, in today's AMD's SoCs. And by that, what I really mean is if you look at the Xbox One X's SoC, the 360 square millimeter SoC, and the fact that it's putting out, I think, what is it, 6.01 teraflops. If you replace that with a 7 nanometer processing node or a 7 nanometer plus processing node, what are you likely to get? And what we'll do is we'll fill in the occupying space of the CPU with a 2 4-core, 8-thread AMD Zen processors, or Ryzen, whichever you'd like to call them, just for the sake of argument. And what you're going to find out is that the amount of transistors that you can cram into that processor or that SoC is going to be roughly, it's going to be a little over 5 times. Okay, and we're going to have to do a little bit of arithmetic here. I don't know if you guys know who Cassandra was. She was one of King Priam's daughters, if I'm not mistaken, the Trojan King. She was a Trojan princess. And her curse was knowing the future ahead of time and telling it to people, but having nobody believe her. And every once in a while, I feel like Cassandra, because it's an echo chamber. There's an echo chamber out there, and nobody seems to want to look at the emperor and say, hey, this emperor has no clothes. But in a good way, because what we could potentially get is far greater than what have our sights set on. And this is going to lead me to 2 other videos I want to make in the future. One about the Xbox Next and its potential release date and why. And then, of course, a video I've been talking about making for a while, which is what defines definition. And I think that's going to be a 2-part, or at the very least a 2-subject video. So that might be a little bit of a longer video. Hopefully not too long-winded. Hopefully I'm starting to get my point across a little bit better. I don't blame some of you guys for not watching some of those technical videos. They are a little long and long-winded. Anyways, so just to do some quick math here, I've got my little girl asking me to put her up on the beanbag here. If you've got a, let's say, 16 by 16, okay, that's the node, all right? 16 nanometers, all right. Gives you 256, okay? So if you do some quick math, you know 7 times 7 is 49. So you divide that by 49, okay? And you have 5.224489, yada, 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 et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Basically what that is the increase in transistors that you can cram. Now, irrespective of whatever architectural limit you may have with a certain type of GCN, what does GCN stand for? Is graphics compute now. Irrespective of that, that's your real estate at that very same process. If you look at, and that's just a regular 7 nanometer, if you look at the fact that 7 nanometer plus is going to be based on, or it's going to yield about 20 times more density per square millimeter of transistor, you can multiply that by 1.2 and you get, hold on, I gotta start over, 256, help me out guys, 256 divided by 49 equals 5.2. All right, so we multiply that by 1.2, and that gives us 6.269, almost 6.3. All right, times 6.01, and now you've got 37.67. Okay, Now, this is not taking into account anything. If we want to add something like a modest 10% increase in clock speed, we can do that. So we're going to say times 1.1. And now we're at almost 41.5 teraflops. A crazy number. Now, you have to realize this includes the two 4-core, 16-thread total CPU. This includes the CPU inside of this SoC. And this SoC that is running, which would have to release at the time that the 7 nanometer plus node is mature enough to handle the orders for. So we're looking at past a PlayStation 5 or past a 2020 release date for anything that uses. But what I'm getting at is that you have an incredible amount of headroom for growth. So when you throw out numbers like 20 or 24 teraflops on a 7 nanometer node, this is not at all clickbaity, outrageous, outlandish. Is it an aggressive prediction? Absolutely. Has there been any other corroboration in the industry that would let us think that that's indeed what they're planning? In a direct way, absolutely not. But there are other ways that you could look at the situation and think to yourself that, yes, this is the way it needs to go. And part of that is the sheer competition in the market. Now, I will say this. I want to make sure for the sake of propriety that I include a couple of things. First of all, we don't know how these processing nodes compare to each other. Chances are that it's not we can absolutely assume. We can assume for absolute certainty that it's not a true 7 nanometer node. The real question is, how close is it to a 5.2 times increase in density for just a plain 7 nanometer over the 16 nanometer? Because I've got news for you guys, that probably isn't a true 16 nanometer node either. So as long as the ratios are relatively close, then you can still get a very healthy amount of headroom. Secondly, you have to account for the speed increase as well, which will assist you in getting more teraflops. And when you're looking at the PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 5, one of the things that you're looking at is a 320 nanometer. So I'm actually hedging my bets when I'm saying 20 to 24 teraflops. Another thing you have to keep in mind, this is getting a little bit more technical here, and is one of the reasons why it takes a while for the process to mature, is that you have to account for a greater amount of defects. If it's true that we're going to get anywhere close to a 5 times increase, even if it's something like a 4 time increase, you're still looking at numbers in the high 20s, mid to high 20s, without any problem whatsoever. And I shouldn't say whatsoever, but much more realistically. But one of the problems you have is that there tends to be defects in the silicon wafers. And the smaller you have your node, the more proportionately large those defects are. So as your transistors get smaller and smaller, the more problems they're going to encounter running reliably. And sometimes you're going to have CUs or nodes that just don't work at all. So you're going to have to disable some, and that affects directly your yields, which affects your cost. Now, a smaller chip has less of a chance of having more defects. So the smaller you make your chips, the greater percentage you're going to have of chips that are actually functioning correctly. So that increases your yield, which means for every wafer of silicon you print out, you have a higher percentage of something that's sellable, usable. So that's a greater profit margin, which means you can sell them for cheaper. If you make larger chips, you're going to have a higher percentage of chips that are defective simply because there's more surface to absorb defects that could potentially be catastrophic for a compute unit. So that's another thing that you have to keep in mind. Those are two things. In the future also, I mean, if we're going to be completely honest, another thing also is the type of compute unit you're dealing with and the type of instructions that are being performed. Because a certain type of compute unit that may be more efficient at performing more complex instructions may actually have less instructions per clock cycle, which would make the teraflop count lower, even though it's actually a much more powerful machine at the end of the day. So that's another a third wrench in the analysis of how much teraflops. A teraflop isn't actually a teraflop. They're not, and this is something that was discussed well over a year ago, I think, in a lot of the sites, tech sites, that it's not always an apples to apples comparison. So when I state 20 to 24 teraflops, please keep in mind that I'm using that as an equivalency. So who knows what's actually going to happen. I've stated before that the Navi chipset is only as good as a predictor of what the PlayStation 5 and the next Xbox are going to be, as it is probable to actually be that particular CPU. So that's basically it, guys. That's the reason why I'm making this video, is to give you guys a clear demonstration from a standpoint of simple arithmetics as to why it's very plausible. And if we have to increase the price to 500, by all means, but I'm pretty sure that that increase in cost is probably coming from the RAM requirements and not the CPU. I think Moore's Law still has plenty of room for growth. I don't think we're going to get into some real trouble until we start trying to push past 5 and maybe even get to 3 nanometers. And even then, we may continue to push further because those might not actually be true 5 and 3 nanometers. They might actually just be a marketing phrase, which is good news for us because we get more and more power. All right, guys, please rate, comment, and subscribe. And most of all, comment. Let me know. Let me know if this made any sense to you guys, if there's any flaws in my logic, if you can actually point out the flaws, not just simply tell me I'm dead wrong or so wrong that it's painful, or whatever the case may be. Let me know. Hope you guys have a great day, and I'll be making another video here shortly. All right, take care. Bye-bye.